The idea of a cruise virus quietly spreading from cabin to cabin has a way of gripping people instantly. It feels familiar, almost expected, because cruise ships have long been linked with outbreaks. But when whispers of a deadly hantavirus case began to circulate in that same setting, the story took on a more alarming edge. Was this something passengers were passing to each other? Or was the truth more complicated and far less visible? Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share for more updates. Thanks. Let's start with what actually defines hantavirus infection, because this is where most of the confusion begins. Hantaviruses are not like the typical cruise ship villains, such as norovirus or influenza. They don't usually spread through coughing, touching surfaces, or close human contact. Instead, transmission is tied to rodents, specifically exposure to particles from their urine, droppings, or saliva that become airborne and are inhaled by humans. That single fact changes everything. Because if hantavirus isn't spreading person to person, how does a cruise outbreak even happen? This is where the timeline becomes the real story, and the hook that keeps unfolding. Imagine this. A passenger board the ship feeling perfectly fine, maybe just a little tired. A few days later, they develop what seems like a mild flu, fever, muscle aches, fatigue. On a cruise, that's not unusual. Medical staff on board are trained to look for common, contagious illnesses first. So the initial assumption might be influenza or another viral infection. But hantavirus doesn't follow a simple script. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share for more updates. Thanks. The incubation period can stretch from 1 to 8 weeks, meaning the person may have been exposed long before stepping foot on the ship, maybe during a hiking trip, a rural visit, or even cleaning a storage space where rodents had been present. By the time symptoms escalate, often suddenly into severe respiratory distress, it's already a medical emergency. Now picture that scenario unfolding over days or even weeks at sea. A few passengers fall ill. Rumors start. People begin connecting dots that may not actually be connected. The narrative shifts from isolated illness to something spreading on board. Fear fills in the gaps where information is missing. And that's how the idea of a cruise hantavirus outbreak takes hold. But here's the critical reality. Most hantavirus strains are not contagious between humans. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention consistently emphasizes this. There is one rare exception, the Andes virus found in parts of South America, which has shown limited person-to-person transmission. Even then, such cases are uncommon and typically require close, prolonged contact. So the likelihood of a true, sustained hantavirus outbreak spreading across a cruise ship is extremely low. What's far more plausible and supported by past investigations is a misinterpretation of timing and symptoms. When illnesses appear in clusters, especially in confined environments, the human instinct is to assume a shared source or chain of transmission. But with hantavirus, the connection often lies elsewhere, a shared exposure before boarding, or simply coincidence amplified by proximity. To understand why hantavirus continues to spark concern, you have to look at its history. The virus first gained global attention during the Korean War, when thousands of soldiers developed a mysterious hemorrhagic fever. Since then, researchers have identified multiple hantavirus strains around the world, each linked to specific rodent hosts. In North America, for example, deer mice are known carriers of the Sin nombre virus, responsible for many cases of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, HPS. In other regions, different rodents carry different strains, but the pattern remains consistent. The virus depends on animal reservoirs, not human chains of transmission. That's why the cruise virus label is misleading, even if it makes for a compelling headline. Still, the fear isn't entirely misplaced. Hantavirus can be deadly. Once symptoms progress to HPS, patients may experience rapid fluid buildup in the lungs, leading to severe breathing difficulties. The fatality rate can be high if treatment isn't immediate and intensive. That seriousness is what fuels the urgency, and sometimes the panic, around suspected cases. But there's a quieter, more important lesson buried in these stories. It's about awareness, not alarm. Understanding how hantavirus actually spreads shifts the focus from fear of other people to awareness of environments. It highlights the importance of recognizing early symptoms, especially after potential exposure to rodent-infested areas. It also underscores a need for accurate, timely diagnosis, something that can be challenging when initial symptoms mimic far more common illnesses. And then there's a broader question. Why do these stories capture so much attention? Because cruise ships are symbolic. They represent escape, leisure, and controlled environments. When something invisible and dangerous enters that space, even if only in perception, it disrupts that sense of safety. The contrast makes the story more powerful. But power doesn't always equal truth. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share for more updates. Thanks. So the next time headlines suggest a mysterious virus spreading across a cruise ship, it's worth asking a deeper question. Is this really an outbreak, or is it a case of misunderstanding amplified by circumstance? With Hantavirus, the answer is usually the latter, and that's the real twist in this story. The danger isn't typically the person next to you on the deck or in the dining hall. It's something far less obvious, something that may have been encountered weeks earlier in a completely different place. In a world quick to assume contagion, Hantavirus reminds us that not every cluster is a chain reaction. Sometimes it's just a series of events that only look connected when viewed too closely. And in that gap between perception and reality, that's where the real story lives.